Well, I think that teed it up nicely for our next speaker, who I think has even more to talk about now based on the prompting from David. So I'd like to introduce Mike Strauss. Mike Strauss is the chairman of the Energy Advisory Committee, which is a mayor-appointed group here in the city of Newburyport. He's going to talk about the 5-year plan. Dr. Mike Strauss is the chair of the Newburyport Energy Advisory Committee, and he has been since 2010. During this time, the Energy Advisory Committee has helped the city receive green community status and reduce energy use and costs for the residents and the city. Initiatives include converting all of our streetlights to energy-efficient LEDs and pursuing solar power for residents in the city, among other issues. So please welcome Mike Strauss.
Thank you very much. I think I'm going to take a cue from Mark Ritchie and change the title. I think he gave me the title 5-year plan. I have no idea what's going to happen in 5 years. All I can tell you is some of the initiatives that we're working on right now. And I'm going to try to focus on some of a couple of the bigger initiatives, not get too much in the weeds of what we're doing. And I'd say as the Energy Advisory Committee is a group of volunteers, and as such, we have no budget, no authority to do anything, and no responsibility in some sense. But I have to say the volunteers on the committee have been incredibly active, and they're really a good bunch of folks, and things have actually gotten done, and our job is to persuade others to do things, and hopefully I can persuade some of you. And also, since we are volunteers, we are always looking for more volunteers. So feel welcome to help them. So the big picture, not just what's 5 years, but what we're trying to do is get to net zero. Dave Hall mentioned net zero, and we have made several commitments in the city to net zero. It's in the master plan. It's in our energy roadmap. Our mayor has signed onto the C40 agreement, which has various net zero components to it. And of course, the question is, what is net zero? And really what it is getting all of our energy from sustainable sources. That's the goal. There are a whole bunch of different definitions on how you can do it, and we work with them on some of the other talks you'll hear, like Deborah Shepard talking about greenhouse gas emissions and how you do the accounting for them. You really have to get into the nitty-gritty of that. But for here, we want to get our energy from sustainable sources, do it as best as we can, and if there's any stuff that we still can't do, somehow figure out a way of offsetting that. And there are various ways of doing that. And we want to base it on reality. So you can't just say, oh, it's, if I turn off this light 5 minutes earlier every night, I'm doing a great job. Maybe you are, but let's get a realistic accounting of what's going on so that we can really say we're doing it. And sort of the things here today are looking at the big pictures we can do community-wide to get it. And a reminder, if you're interested in the Energy Advisory Committee, we meet the last Thursday of every month. So Deb Shepard will be talking more about the details of greenhouse gas accounting. But for us, there are 3 big areas. They are the residents of Newburyport, the municipality itself, our city hall, the police, the fire department, the water and sewer department, Department of Public Services, all those schools, they all use energy, and our commercial and industrial. So those are 3 big areas. There are 3 general sources of areas of energy that we use. There's our electricity, there's our building heating, and there's transportation. And as a city, those are pretty much split equally. That our greenhouse gas emissions or energy use is pretty much a third, electricity, building heat, and transportation. If you just look at the residential portion of that, transportation is actually a larger piece of that. But so what plans have we got to try to figure out how to get these, reduce these. So, I'm talking about the big items we as a community can do. There are a lot of personal ones you can do, and I'd say just go to the exhibit hall and you will find lots of things to help with you. But as a community, we are actually looking at leveraging solar. It seems a little odd that solar would be such a big part of it, because here we are in New England, and sort of northern New England, and yet that will be a big part of our the way we can reduce our greenhouse gases. There are a couple of ways we can do it. I'm going to talk about community choice aggregation. There's also another aggregation with natural gas, which we may see if we can do. And there's also more solar energy for our city buildings. And then the second big area will be ordinances for the city, something that we're working on now. Because if you're going to do things, particularly with buildings, and say, how can we make our buildings more green? And you want to institutionalize it so that it's not just Dave Hall coming up every couple of years and saying what wonderful things he's done, but we want to get everybody in on it, then we have to institutionalize this. And that really comes down to ordinances. That's how we institutionalize things at a city level. And so what sort of ordinances make sense for our community, and how we get them into the picture. So community choice aggregation. So first a little bit about the energy industry. In the old days, meaning pre-1997, there was an electric utility in the state, Massachusetts Electric. You bought your electricity from them. They owned both the wires and they owned the power generation. In 1997, 1998, that changed. The state of Massachusetts changed the regulations and said, we're going to split away power generation from power distribution. So now our utility, National Grid, owns the wires that run around, and their sole responsibility is really maintaining and running those wires, and they buy electric power from power generators. And when you pay your electric bill, they're passing through some of that cost to those power generators. And they go out to the market and they buy power on our behalf, knowing, because they have all the information of how much power we use and when we use it. And there's another organization on top of this that helps manage the grid. But basically, there's the wires company and there's power generation company. Now that the two have been separated, you as a resident have the ability to go out and purchase power directly from an energy company. And whatever they charge you will be on your bill, and National Grid will pass it through to them. You can make a separate deal. You don't have to pay what National Grid pays. Unfortunately, that hasn't worked out so well. The Attorney General's office has looked into this, and over the last 2 years, Massachusetts consumers who have chosen that have lost in total about $175 million. So going out on your own and trying to make deals with companies, and the companies that go to you to offer you those deals, is not necessarily a great choice. But there's another way of doing it, where a community can say, we will take all of our residents, put them in a pool, and we'll go out to the market and say, energy companies, make us an offer. Tell us how much. Here's our 6,000 to 8,000 homes in Newburyport. This is what we use for energy. And we'd like to buy from you, and we'd like to get a good deal. And so we as a community can do that. And we've actually done the first step of that. Our city council has allowed us to do that. We have not pulled the trigger on actually starting yet. And the reason is, if we go out and we buy separately, our experts on our energy committee tell us that we are, in some sense, gambling. We're betting that our buyers are better than the utilities buyers. And National Grid is pretty big, so that may or may not work out for us. There are other reasons you may want to do that. You may want to buy on a longer-term basis so that your energy rate does not change every 6 months, as it does with National Grid. So you can level it out, you can have more green power, you can do all sorts of things. But you want to be very clear why you're doing this. And if it is just cost, just going to aggregation may not be a good idea. So what we are looking to do is combine this aggregation policy with another program in the state, which is called community solar. And this is where solar comes in. There is a new program that has come out from the state of Massachusetts. It was implemented starting this past November, and it's called the SMART program. I always forget what that acronym stands for, but it has something, S is clearly solar. And what it allows you, what it does is it says, you, a solar developer, will get an incentive payment if you sell your power to a residential customer. And because they get an incentive to sell to a residential customer, they will give a discount to residential customers. And that discount is not a one-time deal. The typical deals that are available are a fixed discount from whatever the utility is charging. So as the utility rate goes up and down, so will your rate, but it will always be less than what the utility is charging. So our goal is to combine those two programs, community solar with community choice aggregation, and say, we as a community are taking our 6,000 to 8,000 households and going out to the market and saying, we would like to buy solar power for all these people. And we want to get this discount that you give because these are all residents. And then we will have a community aggregation system that guarantees our residents a discount over whatever is being charged by the utility at that time. And we will be using a sustainable renewable energy source. That's the goal. The other reason this is possible is because in the SMART program, you are allowed to generate power anywhere in the national grid zone and use it anywhere else in the national grid zone. So, for example, the city in the past has bought solar power from the solar farm across the river. We can do that because it's close to us. Somebody in Worcester cannot buy from that solar farm, but we can. Now, you can put up a solar farm in Worcester or in North Adams. As long as it's a national grid territory, we can purchase it. That means that there is economic development in central and western Massachusetts, while we in eastern Massachusetts can get lower costs for energy. So it's a win-win, this new system. So we're combining these things to say, we want solar power for our residents. We're all going to go out as a group and buy it and get a discount for everybody. That's the goal. Of course, there are some issues. Nobody's combined these programs before. So if we can manage this, we will be the first in the state, which is kind of nice, an innovative program. But of course, there are some issues with the program. And these are sort of the details of how these two programs work. But we think we're working through them. So one is, if a solar farm today approached you and said, hey, I want to sell you some energy and I give you a discount, and you go, great, and you have to sign a document with them. And so they need a signed document with your meter number attached to it so that they can do this deal. And that would mean we would have to get all of our residents to sign documents, which is kind of a pain. So what we would like to do is say, our community aggregation, since our city council has passed it and allowed us to do this and has community input, then we want that agreement to be able to sign for all of us. And then it doesn't bother the rest of you. We get our power, and you just pay the bill. The other thing is, in community solar, you get two electric bills. You get one from the national grid utility that says, oh, you get some credits for this solar that this solar farm produced. And then you get a bill from the solar farm that says, we put some credits on your bill, please pay this. And so we think that that's an added complication for residents. So in getting okay for this, we want that to be one bill. You just get your bill from National Grid like you always did. It has some credits on it, it has some discount on it, and there's a bottom line that says, please pay this, and you send your check in. And that's it. And you can check and see that it's less than you would have paid. So that's the whole plan. How's it going? Pretty well. Our aggregator, Colonial Power Group, has been working with DPU. And so far, it sounds like the commissioner of DPU is enthusiastic about this. She says that those issues are okay. We should be able to work it. There are some issues for our aggregator, and so we see that this may be coming out in the next few months. At least that's our hope. So we see a way that says we can get our residents a discounted solar energy, and all that happens is you pay your bill and it will be less than it was. The other part about community aggregation I may have skipped is that it's an opt-out program. So that all the residents are put in it from the beginning, but if you don't want to be part of it, that's okay. You can jump out. If you think you can get a better deal someplace else, or any reason whatsoever, you are allowed to hop out. You can also hop back in. There are time frames you have to do this, but it's your choice as a resident. So that's the goal. So if we can do that, that would mean that all of our electric power comes from sustainable sources, and that takes a huge chunk off our net zero goals. So one thought, if you say, oh, if we're doing that, well, why don't we do what Dave Hall said, which is convert everything to electric. Go to heat pumps, go to electric cars, and then we're getting all our power from solar, and then it's finito alla musica. Everything is just all of our power for cars, buildings, and electricity are from sustainable solar. Well, we can encourage that behavior, but it's not as easy as just saying, as doing this community aggregation, you'd have to convince everybody to use electric cars, heat pumps, and all that sort of stuff. So we can encourage that, but we can't enforce it. And there's a matter of personal choice. Similarly, with electric aggregation, there's natural gas aggregation, that you can buy your natural gas if you were on the pipeline from other suppliers. So we will be looking into that over time. This is at a very nascent point. We have not really looked into this much. But could we do the same thing and use some sort of biogas as our source? We have heard of no other communities doing this yet, but it is a possibility. And also for those who are on fuel oil, while one might have buyers groups, there is biofuel for that. Currently, if you go to Lombardi, all of their fuel is 20% biofuel. So whoever your fuel supplier is, it's worthwhile asking them if they have a biofuel choice. Back to solar, we currently have a 500 kilowatt system on the Knox School and the DPS. We buy 2.5 million kilowatt hours a year from the solar farm across the street, across the river. And we are in the process of getting another roughly 2.5 million kilowatt hours from another solar farm to run the rest of the school systems. And again, it's a similar sort of deal. It will be at about a 15% discount. So again, this is using more solar power to power our municipal functions and get a discount doing it. So it's going to sustainable power and getting a better price. That's sort of some of our goals here. And the sort of numbers are $40,000 to $50,000 a year. So onto building ordinances. We would like to institutionalize having better buildings in our city. And this is a long-term project. Buildings are a big part of it. David Hall certainly knows how to do it. And so we look to him actually to help us understand some of these things. But we want to institutionalize this and get this into the fiber of our building. And the first thing is to figure out how much energy each building is using. And that's not only an energy, but it's really a consumer protection issue. That if you're buying or renting a house or planning on doing it, you should be able to know how much energy it uses and how much it's going to cost you, because that's an important part of your finances. And much like you have a building inspection to make sure that the electric system is up to code, that the furnace isn't leaking CO2, that you have smoke detectors in the house and all those sorts of things. This is a consumer protection issue, that you want to know how much you're going to have to spend to keep this building going at a reasonable temperature and using reasonable appliances. So the first step is getting a disclosure on that. And there are some examples, and we are using Cambridge as a model. These are known as BEUDOs, or Building Energy Use Disclosure Ordinances. And then once you get the energy disclosure, you can start to say, okay, what do we do for new buildings going up? Can we set higher standards for them so they are more energy efficient? And then longer term, you can say, what do we do about older buildings? And for that, you say, well, how do we do rehabs and renovations? So that you phase these in over time. So for energy use disclosure, there are a number of things you want to know. And Cambridge is really doing this only for commercial buildings because Cambridge has Harvard, it has MIT, it's got a bunch of pharmaceutical companies, it's got a bunch of high-tech companies, and that's a big part of their use. Newburyport has more residential. So it's going to be important for us really to start on residential and include residential in the whole mix of things. And so what do these building energy use disclosure ordinances ask for? Well, they want to know the address of the building, they want to know how many square feet are in the building, they want to know what the building is used for, and they want to know how much water is used, how much electricity is used, how much natural gas is used, how much fuel oil is used, propane, whatever it is that's being used to heat it. And you look at those things and you go, well, you know, if I send a postcard to every resident in the city every year and ask them to fill this out, probably most of them will throw it in the trash, not even the recycling. And they'll look at it and say, the city has a lot of this information. So we want to get what we can from the city first. So the address, the square feet, the use, that's all in the assessor's database. The water, that comes from the water department. Then it comes down to electricity and fuel. Well, if you use natural gas, that's National Grid, which is also the electricity. And if we have this ordinance, we can go to the utilities and say, we would like to know for each building in our city how much electricity and natural gas they use. And once you've got that, that's about 60 to 70% of all the buildings in Newburyport. Don't have to do anything. All they have to do is confirm the information. For the rest of the 30 to 40%, we need to know what fuel they're using and how much. So that would be really the only thing. So the job is to keep it simple for the residents and also simple for City Hall. Because if we sent out those postcards and asked people to fill them out, then the City Hall would get another 8,000 postcards a year that somebody would have to enter the data into some separate computer system. So part of this is getting our system straight so that we can get all this information from various databases, put it together, have it accessible at the assessor level, and then we will know which buildings use how much, and we'll be able to target them for improvements. The information will be accessible, so if you were buying or renting or selling your house, you can have that information available to a seller or a buyer. So that's step one, and we're working on that today. So then come in the ordinances for new buildings and rehabs. And basically, we don't want to start from scratch. We want to use existing standards and say, this is how these standards exist. There are organizations that govern them. There are ways that they are improved over time. We want those organizations to do that work. We will accept them and use them. And so the ones that come to mind are LEED and Passive House, but there's always an opt-out. So if somebody is saying, I'm doing something innovative here, or I have a special situation because my house is built into a hill, or whatever it happens to be, then you have the option of saying, I can prove that this is just as good as the LEED standard that's out there, and you may do that. So that there are standards that you can use, but you can also use, do something else as long as it is as good as whatever the building code is. Also with these newer codes, there's generally a solar component that goes on them that says, in the short term, we want these houses, your new houses, to be solar ready, which generally means that their roofs are oriented correctly, that they can get a certain amount of power on them, and then later it will be that they have to be have at least a certain percentage of their power from solar. What are some of the issues with these ordinances? Generally, you just heard from David Hall about the added insulation that goes on. And so when you add insulation to a roof or a wall, you're extending the footprint. And so a developer may say, gee, I'm being a good person here. I'm making a thicker building, and now I've got less square footage that I can rent out or that I can use. So the idea is to give a variance or an exclusion to larger walls and higher ceilings that occur due to added insulation. So that means that extra 2 inches, either in height or wall, allows you to expand your footprint without being hit for it. And is this possible to do in Newburyport? Well, we just heard a great lecture from Dave saying, yes, we can. And we heard from Mark Ritchie on the industrial side saying, yes, we can do these things. So this isn't impossible. It's going on today, and it's happening. So what are some other big picture items that are sort of on our radar? Mark Ritchie talked about his wind power. There's a group in the area that's looking at wind power offshore in the North Shore. There's a lot of activity right now in the South Shore of Massachusetts. But there's a start to look at power. And there's a group getting together, and this is really a regional issue for a number of towns and states because it goes up Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine. And the question is, where do you bring the power on shore? Well, we have one place in Seabrook, another in Salem, and so there are opportunities in our area. And this is really will be a regional effort to get the OKs, to have permitting, and all that sort of stuff. Electric vehicles and the heat pumps. These are larger things that are hard for a community to enforce, and so we really need help from the state and the feds to bring them on. And so we also encourage people to support these and talk to your representatives. And if you're interested in personal things you can do, there's always the Mass Save Energy audit. Linda Guthrie is in the exhibits room. She is running a community outreach program that's sort of through the Energy Advisory Committee. And so sign up, get a no-cost energy audit. And if you like, the Energy Advisory Committee meets the last Thursday of every month, 7 p.m., City Hall, 2nd floor. Thank you very much. I think there's a booth that I will answer questions at the Energy Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Mike.